Greetings and salutations, friends. It is your old friend Urban. You guys have seen me plenty of times now. Pastor Carner's back out at the gold mine. I think he had some luck last time, so you're stuck with me. I think he said he'll be back Friday, so I'm glad to be filling in a little bit for you guys. I'm glad to have the pleasure to be up here in front of you guys. Let's let everyone go ahead and join in, and let's get the intro playing. Stay tuned, guys.
The last chapter's begun. We're standing now by a crossroad. We all have to make the decision whether or not to join the truth mission. The people are coming together, awake and aware more than ever. A spiritual levitation. Let's live the shadow veil from the nation. They stole your life and programmed your mind. A mind control manipulation, the real alien invasion. They stole your life and programmed your mind. A mind control manipulation, the real alien invasion.
Guys, it's my pleasure to be back here for you again tonight. I think it's been what 2 weeks since you guys last saw me. It's only been about a week. It hasn't been that long. Let's see. It is Tuesday, the 24th, here on the East Coast, where I'm at in Ohio. Tonight, I really just thought we would kind of watch some videos. We're not going to watch like one video. We're going to kind of rotate through. I'm just going to look at some of the shit that's going on in the world. You know, how I am ramble on a little bit. People from the audience are welcome to ask me stuff, ask me questions. So I'm just going to let you see some of the crazy shit that I've found, and you can partake on the research with me. So, the first thing I've got for us to check out is this guy on YouTube, and this guy's pretty uh, good. Like he knows what the fuck's going on. Uh, let's see. Let me get his name. I think I got it here. Minutes of Horror is the guy's name. Counter is counter to what it is, but it's not really a like a horror video or anything like that. But I figured I would play this for you because this was pretty fucking interesting when I saw it, and yeah, I wanted to show y'all. So let's see. Let me share my screen. Hey Claire, what's up? What's up, Boots? Make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, the follow button. Really helps us out. Trying to get into a groove of saying that because I always forget. Boots is pretty good about reminding us that I even got a little like and subscribe slide in the intro. But let's see.
We are going to be looking at some disturbing videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. So, with all these events currently going on in the world, we don't know what's real, what's fake, what's
Hey, what's
AI,
up,
what's
bunny?
not AI, and what's out there to mentally manipulate us. I thought it's a good time to go ahead and talk about Project MK Ultra. Now, for those that do not know what MK Ultra is, I'll go ahead and do a brief rundown, and this is coming directly from the CIA's own website because they actually declassified the program. Reading this article right here, it goes on to say MK Ultra was the code name for a covert CIA mind control and chemical interrogation research program run by the Office of Scientific Intelligence. Under MK Ultra, there were various ways of controlling the human behavior, anywhere from filling up an individual with drugs like LSD to horrific mental and physical abuse that would make even the hardest minds crack to carry out various tasks. The United States government said they terminated the project in the late 1960s, which is true. That is very true. And before that, they also terminated MK Delta, which was the predecessor to MK Ultra. So they terminated MK Delta and they continued with MK Ultra. So you can see what I'm getting at here. They
I think what
terminated
I'm
MK
also going to do
Ultra
is I'm also
and they
going to take
continued
you
on
through
with
this
something far
article.
more
The
advanced,
CIA
which they
put out a
indeed did.
document, a
A lot
big
of people
book
believe that more
on
advanced
guerrilla
program being
warfare,
Project
on how
Monarch,
to
which
carry
it
out
is. They even
guerrilla
apply
warfare,
electroshock therapy to a pregnant
how
woman's
to
womb
turn
to control the human behavior
gatherings like
right
protests
away,
into
right from the
violent
start.
protests.
But let us go ahead and read
It's
these other
very
programs that
interesting,
came
and
after
I might
MK Ultra.
review
I'm
that with you
actually reading
guys.
this from the esd.whs.mil website, which comes directly from the Department of Defense. I'll go ahead and link this PDF in the comment section below. I'll go ahead and pin it so you can go ahead and follow along. So apparently this is where all the information comes from. It goes on to say that in testimony on August 3rd, 1977, before a joint session of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research, the Director of Central Intelligence reported that the Central Intelligence Agency had located a number of boxes of documents consisting largely of financial records relating to experiments using human subjects in which drugs were tested for mind control and behavior modification purposes. But what this article leaves out is the extreme physical and mental abuse that these human subjects went through. They're only talking about the drugs because it relates to the financial records. But the PDF goes on to say that the director testified that it appeared that 3 other projects described by these documents, projects designated MK Search, MK Often, and MK Chickwit, were Department of Defense programs with which the Central Intelligence Agency had had some contact. The director also described 3 other projects designated MK Ultra, MK Delta, and MK Naomi, which were primarily Central Intelligence Agency projects, but which might have had some Department of Defense involvement. You can see right here, MK Delta, this was apparently the first project established by the CIA in October of 1952 for the use of biochemicals in clandestine operations. It may have never been implemented operationally. I don't believe this was the first. I believe this was the first one where the financials came into question, but you can also see MK Ultra here, which they say was the successor project to MK Delta. You can see MK Naomi here. This project began in the 1950s and was terminated, at least with the respect to biological projects, in 1969. This may have also been the successor to Project MK Delta. Its purpose was to stockpile severely incapacitating and lethal materials and to develop gadgetry for the dissemination of these materials. But here's where we come to the successor of MK Ultra, which would be MK Search. This was apparently a successor project to MK Ultra, which began in 1965 as they were getting rid of MK Ultra and was terminated in 1973. The objective of the project was to develop a capability to manipulate human behavior in a predictable manner through the use of drugs. Then we have MK Chickwit. This was apparently a part of the MK Search program. Its objective was to identify new drug developments in Europe and Asia and to obtain information and samples. Then next, MK Often. This was also apparently a part of the MK Search program. Its objective was to test the behavioral and toxic effects of certain drugs on animals and humans. This part goes on to say how in September of 1977, the agency permitted the Department of Defense representatives to search additional boxes containing MK Ultra records. Both sets of materials consisted of approvals of advances of funds, vouchers, and accounting records relating to these projects. So as you can see, they terminate the projects, they terminate the name like MK Ultra, but then they continue on with far more advanced programs. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and read this whole
That's
PDF.
why
You can
all
go
of
ahead
the
and read it yourself.
states
Like I said, I will
have
go ahead and link it. But I do also want to
statutes
read this
against
part
ritual
right here
abuse,
where it
that
says
they have
Army
exemptions
programs.
for any
It
type of
appears from
federal
the available
research
documents that the
project.
Army
State
was
research
involved in one
projects are
aspect
exempt.
of the Central Intelligence Agency project designated as MK Chickwit and two aspects of a counterpart project designated as MK Often. The document search is described in Selection A below, and each of the Army programs is described in Section B below. So, in a nutshell, these two programs are identified as identification of new drugs with behavioral effects, and number two, databases on evaluation of pharmacological products. And they want us to believe that the Army did not have any
Um,
human test subjects.
in terms
They
of
just funded
water,
for the collection
it's
of this information.
there's a
But let us
lot
not forget that
of
in the beginning of 2025, we had two big
there's a
suspicious
lot of
events
moving pieces to
involving
it.
members
They
of the
have a lot of
military, more
crap
specifically
going on
members
now.
of
It's,
Fort
the
Bragg.
sky,
We
it's through
had
the
what happened
water,
in
it's
New
through the
Orleans
food.
and the individual that caused
More
what
or less,
happened in
it's
Las Vegas, the
the
Cybertruck
like the
explosion.
nano
So I don't
computing,
really think their experiment
the
stopped either. There
what's
was
it
a
called? It's on
FOIA
the tip of my
request on the
tongue.
CIA website for MK
The
Search, and as
mRNA,
you can see, they present us with
the
just this.
micro
But
or
there is a
nano
file attached for an
particles.
MK Ultra
That's where
subproject, and a
you run
lot
the
of
risk of
MK
those
Search
being
is actually
embeddable
still
into
classified.
the
There is some
human,
declassified
and
information, but
then
it's hard to
I have
read.
no
I'll
idea
also
what
go
they could
ahead
do, but
and
it's
pin this
probably
in the comment section
in
as
such
well.
a gray area
But
that nobody
yeah, a
does.
lot of it is
Nobody
still
knows what the
classified.
hell they're
But
able
make
to
no
do, and
mistake
if
about
if
it,
you
they're
really
still
could
running these
comprehend it,
very
you'd
advanced
probably
programs
just
today and
snap.
terminating the old ones. Something else took MK Search's place, and whatever that was, something else took its place. And I do believe that something far more
I'm not going to
advanced
watch this
involves the
whole video
TV and
right
media,
now.
something
I'm
that
going
can
to
target the mass
wait until it
population
gets
as a
to.
whole through music,
I think it's this
movies,
episode that
news,
he's
and so
talking about
forth.
it. I hope it is.
Programs now
There's
designated to
something that
control
I
the
wanted
human behavior on a
to
mass
like I wanted
scale.
to show you,
And
but I
it's
think
not
it's
just
this
the United
episode.
States government, but all these governments around the world, China and so forth. Because all these governments that we think are enemies on TV are all in the World Economic Forum giving very similar speeches and all friendly to one another. They are involved in the Bilderberg meetings and other meetings that the public is not privy to. They also control us through food and through the use of AI.
There you
Anything
go.
that's uploaded on the internet that we see that may be suspicious or strange or something they may be caught involved in, the first thing people will say is that it's just AI because we're presented as the public with very powerful AI
Yeah, people are
like
not
Google
able to tell
VO3.
anymore what's
So again, like
real,
I
what's
said in the
AI.
beginning, we don't know what's real, we don't know what's fake, and I do believe that's what's a part of this new mind control project, this far more advanced one. But anyway, we still talk about these news stories, and more than ever, we have to use our discernment. But moving on to another news story, Sunday I covered a news story about how all these pelicans, they dropped dead out of the sky over Mobile, Alabama. Now, I did get a comment in one of my most recent videos, I believe a couple days ago, where somebody said to me that these pelicans, they are still all in the street. They're everywhere. Nobody came to pick them up. Which is interesting because we had news and media go out there on that exact same day, again Sunday, saying they called police and animal control. They said that lightning knocked these birds out of trees.
Lightning.
I instantly called BS on that
Wow.
because white pelicans, they do not go into trees. They do
Lightning.
not nest or perch in trees. Matter of fact, if you go ahead and look at the photos and videos that news and media gave us, you will see that the bodies of these birds, a lot of them, are nowhere near any trees. So I said there's something very suspicious about this story. Now the residents are saying that the bodies of these birds are starting to stink. They're causing a smell in the air and they're demanding the bodies to be picked up. So in turn, the City of Mobile Sanitation Department did go ahead and give a response by saying, while our animal services team only handle live animals, our sanitation crews will be removing any carcasses located in the public right of way. But here's the thing, a majority of these carcasses are located on private property, so they're saying they can't touch it. They said they
They're
cannot
afraid of
enter the
some
property
chemical or
without
something.
a
I can
right
already
of
tell.
entry form that each property owner
If
has
they're
to
not
sign.
touching them, then they're
And they
scared
go
of
on to say
something.
that if a resident prefers not to sign the form, they may place the animal remains at the roadside in advance of their next scheduled trash collection, which won't be until June 25th. And the residents are saying, please come out, we'll sign it. And they still have not come out and given any form. And at the same time, the residents are breathing in what these bodies are leaving behind. This news agency, News 5, they went ahead and said, we returned to Stewart Drive today to find that the
Sure
birds
as
have
hell
not
ain't
been
no
cleaned
lighting.
up. News and media were told that the pickup would happen no later than Monday, They go out there at 4:30 p.m. yesterday, and the bodies are still there. So the timeline has now changed, and the city is not showing any urgency. They go ahead and say whether we have a sign or not, the latest we
That's
can go ahead
pretty
and pick
funny.
up these bodies
Just a
is either the
bolt of lightning
21st
got
or
all
the
over him.
23rd. So there's definitely something more happening here, because there's zero urgency from the city to come collect these bodies, which now the residents are breathing in. So do with that as you like.
Morgan Ashley live for us in studio tonight. Good evening, Morgan.
Good evening, Sean. So Representative Scott spoke this morning at a legislative committee in Boise. She's worried about the possibility that people are eating other people and may not know they're doing so.
That's why I say
She
this.
says with the rise in human composting, which is legal in several states as a means of dealing with human remains, she was concerned about what other uses may be found. During today's meeting, she explains what finally convinced her to act.
I was on a plane this summer, and I was watching, you just kind of randomly go through channels, and I watched a video of some food show, and the three contestants tasted the food, and they had to guess what was in it. It was some kind of a sausage, and one of the options they told these people that was in the food was human flesh. And I thought, at that point, and this was on a plane this year, I thought,
Guys, I'm going to stop to address this. So, this is a very hard thing to talk about. It's the curse of it, I think. The curse of, the Bible says anyone who eats human flesh is cursed. So, the curse is that once you find out, you'll be permanently, screwed up in the head. You'll be permanently fucked up. It's like you can't accept it. Even if it's, it's true. Because I know it's true to a limited extent. I'm not saying it's in all of it. I want to have faith that it's not in all the food, but I think it's in a good majority of the food to a very, and it's some real shit.
this is going to be normalized at some point. The way our society's going and the direction we're going, this is going to be normalized.
Morgan Ashley live for us in studio tonight. Good evening, Morgan.
Good evening, Sean. So Representative Scott spoke this morning.
So big media, they want us to get comfortable with the idea that Soylent Green is people. Now, make no mistake about it. It's been like that for a long, long time now, for years. They just want us now to get comfortable with it.
In the year
they want these
2022.
TV shows to show us that, hey, eating a sausage made of human really tastes no different than any other types of sausage. Now, I mean, look at this news article published by Business Insider. Here's how Hannibal creates food
Fair enough.
that resembles human flesh and looks delicious. We were talking about a commercial not too long ago, a KFC commercial that had these type of undertones where they show us that they turn people basically into chicken tenders. You may be saying these food shows might be doing this for ratings, they're being facetious, but we also have to remember that all but one state in the United States outlaws Soylent Green is people. And
No,
that
but
being
if it's
Idaho.
normalized,
There's already things like
so
human composting,
if they
which
normalize
turns
it, then that
bodies
means
into
they don't have to
fertilizer
hide anymore.
to help nourish trees and plants and other things. But
They don't want to hide
let's be
anymore.
honest, I wouldn't doubt one bit. They're also taking this and, again, adding it into the food. I have covered multiple news stories on this channel where bodies are missing from funeral homes or inside caskets, or family members, they'll go ahead and get their loved ones cremated, and what they'll get in return is just dirt. It's a big business, and there's a lot of money that goes into this. There are also many people out there that do the calculations between how many animals there are and all of these fast food chains and grocery stores and so forth that have animal products, and the numbers just do not add up.
Speed it up.
And again,
Use
like
your
with what
guns
I
against
said when
each
it
other
came to the whole mind control thing, is
to
not
turn
just something
rage
that's
into
happening in the
homicidal
United
rage.
States. This is a worldwide business. Take, for example, this news clip involving
How's it
China
going,
that happened
Shilexi?
just 9 months ago.
The illegal trade of human corpses has been uncovered. Instead of being cremated, over 4,000 bodies were secretly sold to two major biomaterial companies which are tied to the state. The corpses were then dissected and turned into bone grafting materials, generating millions of dollars in revenue over a span of 8 years. The scheme involving funeral homes, doctors, and a state-owned enterprise has exposed a dark side of China's medical industry. Here's our report with more.
In northern China, prosecutors have uncovered a disturbing decade-long scheme involving the illegal sale of corpses meant for cremation. This scheme, spanning at least 7 provinces, has implicated dozens of suspects, including funeral home managers, doctors, and company shareholders. At the center of this shocking case are 2 companies, Shanxi Osteorad Biomaterial and Sichuan Hengpu Technology. From 2015 to 2023, these companies illegally obtained more than 4,000 corpses, generating nearly $53 million in revenue. The cadavers were collected from funeral homes across various localities and were then dissected, stored, and eventually processed into biomaterial devices used in bone grafting procedures. The scheme was not limited to just the companies. Funeral homes in the southwestern provinces
I have no
of
idea if
Yunnan,
it's that
Guizhou, and
high. I
Sichuan,
mean, who
as well as in the
knows? You can
Chongqing
only
municipality, played a
imagine. I
crucial
don't think
role.
it's as much as people think it is, but I think it's enough
These
that it's
funeral
like
homes charged
still enough to
families
bug
for
you out.
cremation
I mean, it's
services,
like
but instead
I can't be
sold
certain
the
that it's
corpses
like
to
as
hospitals
frequent
for
as it
dissection
could
and
be,
storage.
but it's very possible.
In some cases, unclaimed bodies were chosen for the illegal trade. A staff member at the anatomy department of Guilin Medical University
Right. 1 second. Let me pull up this guy's channel, and I want to see if I can find the video that I originally wanted to show you. Because that was the one that I had downloaded. Yeah, and I'll flash this guy's channel so you can subscribe to him. Here we go. Minutes of Horror. That's this guy's channel. Let's see. I think this is the one.
There are multiple, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. So before we go ahead and begin with today's video, I do want to go ahead and give a special shout out to a channel called Truth Seeker. I'm a real big fan of his channel. He's as real as they come, and he's definitely somebody that deserves a lot more subs and watch time. So definitely a big shout out to him. But moving on to this first disturbing story, what in the world happened here? Reading this article from the New York Post, which was published on May 24th, this 28-year-old mother, Beth Martin, she was flying with her family from the United Kingdom to Turkey when all of a sudden she started to feel ill. And she initially dismissed what she was feeling as just food poisoning and decided to go on with her flight. And this kind of hits close to home because about a year ago, I made a video saying that my wife and I, we were coming back from New Orleans. We were inside the airport and she decided to get food from one of the shops. Once we finished eating, we boarded the plane, and a little bit into the flight, I noticed she was turning pale, she was sweating, and she was complaining how her head was hurting her and she had a vomit. She had such a bad time that later on that night, she actually had to go to the hospital. Well, 28-year-old Beth Martin had a very similar experience because during the middle of her flight, she was becoming worse to the point when they touched down in Istanbul, Turkey, she grew delirious and had to be hospitalized.
Electromagnetic radiation.
From here, because once they were inside the hospital, the nurses and the doctors, they were not giving any information to Beth Martin's family. They were very cold and silent to her husband. And the very next day, Beth Martin passed away. No explanation whatsoever. They were not forthcoming. Matter of fact, the Turkish officials were even less forthcoming with her husband and initially suspected him of poisoning her. Beth's body was flown back to the United Kingdom where an autopsy was performed, and British coroners, they told her husband very shocking news, that Beth's heart had actually been removed. That is absolutely crazy, and it sounds like illegal organ harvesting at play here, but listen to this. The Turkish Ministry of Health later revealed Beth's cause of death was cardiac arrest due to multiple organ failure, but did not go into any detail about what caused that. The Turkish government further refuted the British coroner's claims, insisting she did not undergo any surgical procedures during a preliminary autopsy at the hospital where she passed away. So these things that Turkey is saying now, they refused to tell her husband then, but for whatever reason, they are putting together a story. The article ends with, her family now wonders if doctors at Turkey's Marmara University Pendrik Education and Research Hospital in Istanbul missed something, or may have administered penicillin
No, I
before
don't get them
learning she
on
was
here,
allergic to the drug.
unfortunately.
The hospital is now being investigated for Martin's death. It could take coroners in England 6 months to determine what caused Martin's organs to start shutting down. But my question happens to be, what happened to her heart? Is it normal for some countries, if you have a cardiac event and you pass away, they remove your heart? But then they go on to say that she did not undergo any surgical procedures. This story is terrifying, and it just reeks of illegal organ harvesting. Somebody somewhere who is rich and powerful, probably one of the so-called elite, probably needed a heart, and she was just the right person at the right time. In this next disturbing story, this is something I had spoken about in one of my most recent videos. 2 Chinese researchers were arrested for trying to smuggle in this fungus that could end all the crops in the United States. Not only that, it could jeopardize the health of many people. What happens to be interesting is that there are multiple theories floating out there that state that we are actually being distracted away from this story. That's why many people are not talking about it. But reading this article from the New York Post, which was published on June 9th, a Chinese researcher allegedly tried to smuggle biological materials into the U.S. from Wuhan and lied to the feds about the secretive scheme. Shangwan Han, I think that's how you pronounce her name, was arrested Sunday after landing at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport on a flight from Shanghai, according to charging documents. She was charged with smuggling goods into the U.S. and making false statements. Like I said, this would be the 3rd time a person from China would do something like this. And reading the article, it goes on to say, Han is the 3rd Chinese scientist to be charged with smuggling illegal biological materials into Michigan in recent weeks. This boyfriend and girlfriend who were caught last year, which I thought this was a more recent story, but apparently it's not. I don't know why we're hearing about this now. But anyway, they were caught last year trying to smuggle samples of a dangerous crop-killing fungus into the U.S., the FBI said. One of the individuals arrested was a Communist Party loyalist and lab researcher at the University of Michigan who received Chinese government funding for her work, was charged last week in what national security insiders call an attack on the United States food supply. But what's sad is that the United States food supply is always under attack. Whether it's crops being sprayed with chemicals, the skies being sprayed and landing down on the crops, animals being pumped with drugs, we have companies like Monsanto and GMOs, and don't forget, Soylent Green is people. It is just never ending and it's so sad, but who really knows the truth to this story? These people could be scapegoats to something much bigger, because we do know at the end of the day they want us to eat the bugs. They want to control all the food supply. They want to get rid of farmland, cows, things like that. We know that organizations like the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, and so forth, they hate farmland and farm life because they believe, or they tell us anyway, it harms the climate.
I think I know what we're going to do this week while James is gone, because this is something that really needs to be shown. I think you guys really benefit from it. We're going to watch the presentations on the Khazarian Mafia by Chuck Swindoll Jr. So it's probably the best presentations on it. I have them uploaded. They're pretty good.
However, Han lied to officers and said she didn't send packages to members of the Michigan lab, according to court documents. She also claimed the packages contained plastic cups rather than Petri dishes. When the FBI and Homeland Security investigations grilled Han, she admitted to shipping the biological materials to the lab from her research as a PhD student from the College of Life Science and Technology in the University of Science and Technology in Wuhan, according to court documents. Investigators also discovered that Han deleted the content of her electronic device 3 days before she landed in the U.S. What's even more interesting is that the article goes on to say Han was denied a visa to travel to the United States on 2 separate occasions in March. In one of her attempts to obtain a visa, Han could not clearly answer basic questions about herself or her research, according to court documents. Well, how was she getting in? The article ends with an offer letter from the University of Michigan stated that Han was invited to be a visiting scholar at the lab. And the article finishes with, Wuhan is the central Chinese city where the C-19 emerged before it spread into a global pandemic. And after reading these news articles, it kind of makes the woman at the Denver airport that much more genuine. And I already believe this woman, but these news articles add an extra layer of genuine to what she was saying.
I have been kidnapped, me and my kids. Today will be a worse day than 9/11 attack. This is an act of war at United States of America. This piece of shit woman thinks she knows what's happening. We have programmed her to be loyal and stupid enough to follow our rules.
Wow.
All right, I got some questions. I was just outside. It's 9:15, 9:19 now, here in South Georgia. I just seen some, what I thought was a helicopter. Turned out, looked like it was 2-3 helicopters. So I just whipped out my phone. I got a brand new Samsung S25 Ultra. Don't know what the videos are supposed to show, but somebody tell me what the heck is this in the video.
Who the fuck knows? I don't know.
What is that?
Plasmoids, probably.
So is that how helicopters are supposed to look, or?
Yeah. Yeah, that's just wild. No, I'm gonna put us on track. These are a series of videos created in presentation style. The Khazarian Mafia series, and I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen it before. I think I've suggested it. I've never played it, and it's something that I've been meaning to rewatch myself. And so this is some good information. This is good actual research that's been done into the matter. And so I figure it's something worth checking out. This is a really good, well put together series. It's crazy how we're all collectively having troubles eating. I say almost all of us can probably feel that. It's strange, troublesome. (800 AD), an incredibly evil society emerges in Khazaria. Khazarians develop into a nation ruled by an evil king who had ancient Babylonian black arts, occult oligarchs serving his court. During this time, the Khazarians became known to the surrounding countries as thieves, murderers, road bandits, and for assuming, this is important, assuming the identity of those travelers they murdered as a normal occupational practice and way of life. So the thing to understand about the Khazarians is that they essentially assume the identities and collect that which belongs to these people. You know, they kill them and assume their identity. So that's something that's characteristic about the Khazarians.
In 1933, 33rd degree Freemason Franklin D. Roosevelt added the Great Seal to the U.S. dollar, transforming it into an occult talisman. The same year, he signed a gold confiscation order and took the U.S. off the gold standard. At a press conference on March 8, 1933, he joked, "As long as nobody asks me whether we are off the gold standard, that's all right, because nobody knows what the gold standard really is." David Icke wrote, "The 33rd degree Freemason and black nobility president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had this symbol printed on the dollar bill from 1933. It was a symbol of secret societies in Europe long before anyone heard of the United States, and it is awash with Freemasonic and secret society symbolism going back to the ancient world. Notice the symbology and numerology used on the dollar bill. The most obvious symbol is the Illuminati pyramid, with the hovering, all-seeing eye in the capstone. Opposite this is the All-American Eagle, with a downturned U.S. flag affront its chest. These and many other symbols on the dollar come from the ancient stellar, solar, and lunar cults. Michael Tessarian wrote, "The pyramid is for the stellar cult, as are the various stars that appear on the bill. The golden eagle is for the solar cult. The eagle is the symbol of America because it signifies the constellation in Scorpio called Achaea. Scorpio is the sign of power, money, and wealth, as well as secret knowledge. The U.S. elections are held right in the middle of Scorpio, and the birthday of America is in the Scorpionic decanate of Cancer. The double-headed eagle symbol, which came from Babylon and survived through the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, has been today adopted by America, Mexico, Israel, Germany, France, Chile, Italy, Honduras, and many others." David Icke wrote, "The eagle is a widely used brotherhood symbol, and it can be found on the coats of arms of many countries, including Egypt, Libya, and Iraq. It was a major symbol for Germany, and it appears in the designs of pulpits and lecterns used by the Christian Church. Seals like the one used on the Great Seal of the United States can be traced back to at least 4000 BC in Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, and India. The word money comes from the lunar cults. Early words for the moon were mon and min, giving us mani, printed at a mint. We have a worldwide monarchy that controls the world's money supply. We have finance ministers, prime ministers, and their ministries being controlled by occult elites and societies. It is interesting to note that the plant mint is green, our money, printed at the mint, is green, and the Isis moon goddess Statue of Liberty is also green." Jordan Maxwell wrote, "You will see beneath the pyramid 1776 spelled out in Roman numerals, plus the words Inuit."
It's like some Peruvian or it's like some folklore Native American thing. I know exactly what it is. I just don't remember what it's called. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, they just said it was him trying to pay respect to the heritage of that area, but it's like I don't know. It's kind of strange, but
Coeptus, and is translated as Annuit, our enterprise. Coeptus is translated to mean crowned with success, or is crowned with success. Therefore, Annuit Coeptus is our enterprise, which is now a success. Then, in order to find out what enterprise was a success, read on the $1 bill at the bottom of the pyramid, Novos Ordo Seclorum, which translates as the new order of the world, the new world order. The Latin translation of Annuit Coeptus Novos Ordo Seclorum is, our new world order is crowned with success. The other Latin phrase, E pluribus unum, means one out of many, order out of chaos, the Hegelian dialectic, the problem-reaction-solution paradigm used by the elites to drive world events, opinions, and policies. There are 13 letters in Annuit Coeptus, and 13 letters in E pluribus unum. The dollar encodes the number 13 repeatedly. There are 13 stars above the eagle's head, 13 steps on the pyramid, 13 vertical bars on the shield, 13 horizontal stripes at the top of the shield, 13 leaves on the olive branch, 13 arrows, 13 fruits, and 13 numbers. If you draw a six-sided Star of David hexagram around the pyramid on the back of the dollar, 5 of the 6 corners will point to letters ASMON, or when you rearrange them, MASON. Jordan Maxwell
There's all
wrote,
kinds of stuff on
"You will
his
find on the
wardrobe.
dollar bill the eagle, which comes from the ancient concept of the phoenix and has 13 stars above it. The 13 stars are arranged in the configuration of the Star of David, or the hexagram. Most people think the 13 stars represent the original 13 colonies. In the first place, why did they have to have 13 colonies? Why couldn't they have 27, or 4, or 10? When one understands that the number 13 is a very important, profound Masonic number, and that many of the founding fathers of this country were Freemasons, as well as Rosicrucians, then you will follow this connecting thread of material to see what was actually being created. They knew what they were doing when they divided this country into 13 colonies. The number 13 is not an unlucky number for them. It's an unlucky number for you."
Hey everybody, how are you doing? I'm glad that you're here. I know that I've been talking about this video for quite a while now, and I just now am getting my arms around it and the subject, and so it's taken me a while, longer than usual, to go from when I thought I was going to be releasing it to now, to actually releasing it. And so I say all that to say that it's been a real journey for me, and I think that anybody that takes on this subject, which is who actually runs the world, who actually rules the world, anyone who takes on this subject will find that it is not something that is quickly gathered. And I've really found that as I've dug into this, it seems like almost every day another layer is revealed. And
13,
that's also
12
been a reason for the
apostles
delay, is
plus
that
Jesus.
I keep uncovering more and more about this group, because this group goes so far back. So what I've decided to do is I've decided to cut the video in half. So this first video, we're going to be covering from the origin, or our known origin, of human beings all the way till about 100 AD, which was the beginning of the formal Khazarian Mafia, between the Caspian and that would be the Black Sea, just north of the Caucasus Mountains. And 180 really marks the beginning of their infiltration formally and organized into the West, into the organized West, and into what became of the groups that ended up ruling the world. And so since that is a story in and of itself from about 180, we're going to be covering the first part, because to be honest, I haven't found any narratives that cover the origin of human beings and how this group came about through the bloodlines of human beings. I haven't found any essays, I haven't found anything that really digs into it. And the essay that I'm going to be using, which here, let me get the name of the gentleman who wrote it. Yeah, Preston James and Mike Harris wrote an essay that's going to be carrying us from 100 AD to present day. But I haven't found any essays that cover from the origin of human beings until 100 AD that really do this group justice. And since this is our history, since this is the human history and origin, it matters. And so if you're looking for a 5-minute quick and dirty, I am not your guy. This is going to take probably, I'd say, about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get through this first part. And then the essay is probably going to be that again. And that's really going to be the only way, I feel, to communicate, to effectively communicate our history and why the world is the way that it is. And I think that's an awesome introduction into the titling of this, which is Why is the World the Way That It Is? I've named this essay Khazarian Mafia, The God Eaters, by Charles Regan Swindoll. And I'm starting with this nice quote from Aristotle. Nice doesn't do this quote justice. This awesome quote from Aristotle: knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And that really is true. That's why Alan Watts spent his entire career asking the question, who are you? And that's why the Buddha spent his entire life pursuing the question of absolving suffering. And the way one absolves suffering is knowing who you are, knowing the divinity that you are, knowing the divinity that you reflect and come from and emanate. And the journey to that space is extremely varied, and so that at the end of the day, what matters is knowing who you are and finding that out, because no one can tell you. I can't tell you. Your pastor can't tell you. Your government official can't tell you.
He's the guy who wrote
no
the
book,
series.
no movie, no lecture is going to be able to tell you who you are. This is going to be a journey of self-discovery. That's how you find out who you are. And typically it comes through pain. I had an interesting dialogue with a friend on the internet, and she asked the question, is there any way to wisdom that doesn't involve pain? And I really sat and thought about it for a while, and I realized the stuff in my life that matters most cost me the most. There's a great Buddhist quote or Eastern quote that says, to know anything, I must lose everything. And that's been my experience. And I've found that the more that I have lost, the more that I have just set aside as not the answer, but just a part of the answer, the more I've been able to open my mind to a larger reality, a larger truth that is hearkening all of us, especially right now during the Great Awakening. And so I wanted to start this off with a good question, which is,
Claire,
who are you? And this essay is hopefully going to help you understand who you are. Okay, so getting right into it, what we're going to be talking about today is the Khazarian Mafia. And it's of my opinion that this group, as well as constellating groups around and about the Khazarian Mafia, are who have ruled the world since our inception. And I think that the human being, the human genome, is a multifaceted endeavor when you're attempting to understand our history, when you're attempting to know where and what and how we came about. And so it is quite a journey, because that true essence of us has really been hidden from us. And this group, the Khazarian Mafia, has worked very hard for us to not know who we are, because if we find out as a society, as the human collective, if we find out who we are, we will be unrulable, and we will think for ourselves, and we will develop for ourselves, and we won't be held back and shackled down by evil groups. And so the work of the Khazarian Mafia has been to suppress the knowledge of human beings, the history of human beings, the essence of human beings. And that really is what we're pursuing today, is our essence. And our history contains it, but they haven't want us to know it, because we become extremely powerful and an unstoppable force when we know who we are. Okay, so to begin, before we dive into the history of human beings, let's look very quickly at who, in my opinion, are the Khazarian Mafia. So I've developed this little slide here that shows a hierarchy. And at the top of the slide, what you're going to see is the top of the pyramid, the top of the hierarchy, and at the bottom of this slide is the bottom of the pyramid. And what this shows, what I'm hoping to do here, is to begin to open your eyes to a larger reality than the one that has been taught to you by about level 2 here, the entertainers, and 3, the low-level government officials and so forth. Those are the quote-unquote emissaries, the representatives of this evil group, but they present the world, this evil group, in such a way that you would never know that there are many layers below them or above them. So let's look at this. At the top, we have what in Gnosticism is called the Demiurge, Satan, Lucifer, Baal, Molech. These are anthropomorphisms of the evil that undergirds all of these groups. So at the very top of the pyramid is the ruler, overseer, the penultimate example of evil, which would be Satan. And so just below that are the fallen angels, watchers, archons, reptoids. It depends sort of what level you're at as far as what you know and understand about the world. But fallen angels, watchers, this comes out of the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch lays out the world in that there was a developing and thriving community history of human beings that was going on. And then there was a moment when that history, that ongoing saga, was infiltrated by an outside group. And these many, it just depends on where you come from on this planet to determine what the name of this group is. But the common names are the fallen angels, the watchers, the archons, and the reptoids. And the theory is that the watchers involved themselves with humans, human women, bred with them, and the children that came out of those copulations were the Nephilim, the giants. And that's the next level down. Black nobility, Black Pope, Order of the Black Snake, Zoroastrian, and Nephilim bloodlines. Again, these are all hidden. These are not individuals, entities, groups that you would ever know about and you were to never know about. And these are what are behind the next level here, which is the Khazarian Mafia. And the Khazarian Mafia, really, there's a line that's drawn between those top three and the rest of the groups. And that is, this is when you begin to fall into categories of people that you know of, that you might have seen once or twice. The Jesuit order, Babylonian, Canaanite bloodlines. This fills this next level, the Freemasons, Illuminati, Committee of 300, Club of Rome, Scottish Rite, CIA. The bloodlines of those groups are inside the Khazarian Mafia, Jesuit order, Babylonian, Canaanite bloodlines. I know this is a mouthful, but our history is very involved. So this then would lead to the low-level government officials, judges, FBI, WHO, and DEA, supposedly the people that you vote into office, which we all know that you don't. But supposedly, these would be the common everyday people that you're seeing all the time. So you can see, by looking at this order, these groups, you could see we move from a totally invisible order to a fully visible order, and it shifts within these groups here in the middle. What's also interesting, Club of Rome, Scottish Rite, these groups require pedophilia to enter. What you're going to notice, the common thread that comes out of these ancient orders of people, groups of people, is child sacrifice, blood sacrifice. And to be a part of these groups, you must be a person who involves yourself at that level. And so the Scottish Rite and Club of Rome, these groups, it's required that you engage in some kind of CP, in order to enter the group. And then you have the bottom three, low-level government officials, judges, FBI, WHO, DEA, entertainers, media, sports figures, public officials. These would not be the bloodlines. These would not be the true origins. These would be people that have sold their soul. They have sold their life and soul to Moloch, and they have given over all their humanity, all their compassion over to evil. And so they are in service. They are in service to evil, and you are not to know that. Us at the bottom there, the feeders, the breeders, commodities, and assets, that's us. The world, the earth, in my opinion, is a farm, and we are the assets, the commodities that come out of the way the earth is put together, the way that it's run right now. Obviously, this is a blasphemous version of the original earth. It wasn't like this at one time, but it has been the earth, us as a society, have been infiltrated by a parasite, and that parasite is pure evil. And so in order to overcome this, in order to overcome these groups and to change the world, we must save ourselves. And the way we save ourselves is through knowledge, is through learning and understanding not only who we are, but the world round about. And in order to do that, you're going to have to remove the assumptions
I don't believe anyone
that you have.
could really imagine.
And when you see a list like this, you're going to have to begin to see the world in a larger scope than the assumed constriction that has been inculcated into you. And that's inculcated into you through entertainers, media, sports figures, public officials, your education, your science, your medicine, your religion. These are all ways, disciplines used to constrict your world and to make your focus much smaller, to only see the world through a pair of binoculars rather than seeing the world naturally through your own eyes. And so when you see the world confined like this, you're only seeing so much of the world. And really, science, medicine, politics, religion, government, these things, even our agriculture, these things are what deplete and sicken us as individuals and as a society, because they are false realities.
All their
And
masters
so
aren't deep
my
underground
words
there in
here and what I'm
Washington.
showing you here is very revulsive to folks that are really caught up. But it's the only way we're going to grow. It's the only way we're going to learn, is to find out that the history we've been taught, the medicine we've been taught, the life we have been taught is false. And it's because it comes out of this order, as I've showed you, these groups here. A quick look at the costumes these groups wear is the, let's see, let me find it here. Yes, is this slide here, the Cult of Baal image drawn by Dylan Monroe. And this shows you, looking at the top here, this shows you...
I actually will plug that real quick. 1 second. I just put out this today. There you go. I just sent it in chat. And what it is I just put all these. I'm actually an affiliate for the guy who draws those. So if you want to use my link, you can check it out. The guy makes all kinds of cool charts. See, I gave away some for free, so go and download these if you're interested.
The costumes that these groups have worn so that you would never see the actuality below the costume.
Yeah, go ahead and get them.
So they've hidden themselves inside of the kings, inside the royalty, inside the ruling groups and empires that have controlled and steered humanity. And this evil has cloaked itself in many different forms, such as the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuit Order, Pharaonic Egypt. These would be the costumes that the evil has adorned, so that you would never know that you're being ruled by evil. And when you look at a map like this, where it shows how they've simply changed their costume within the theater that is the human collective, you'll see how they have mastered the human race and controlled it, and held it to account in a very, very small world that does not reflect actual nature, actual reality. They've put us into a conflict-oriented world is what they've done, and I've spent many videos talking about that. And one of the ways that you shorten the life and constrict the mind of a human being is by filling them with lies and filling them with poisons, filling them not only with food poisons, but religious poisons and governmental poisons and historical poisons. And you do that enough to any human being, any human collective, you will permanently disable them. Permanently in the sense that as long as they are within and absorbed by those poisons and taken by those poisons, they will not get out. Okay, so from that basic general look at the actual world, let's go to the beginning here on the first slide where I talk about where this essay came from, and yeah, let's get started. This essay is an offspring of the Cliff High Substack write-up called Walk Without Rhythm, found here. And if you'd like, please feel free to copy that address down, put that in your computer, and check it out. I'm going to also present his essay here. As you know, I agree with some of what Cliff High says, and I disagree with some of what Cliff High says. That's called a healthy relationship. Cliff retweeted my Luciferian video as legit info years ago, so I can't dismiss the guy completely. His human manipulation theory has legit clout, and it ties in well to our discussion today. Now, before I continue any further, I know that this evil group has done a very good job of tribing out humanity. Tribing out meaning coercing different groups of people into set beliefs. And the beliefs that these different groups subscribe to are incongruent with each other. So these tribes of people don't intermingle very well because they have been tribed out in their beliefs. Here's a great example. There's a whole host of people who believe in flat Earth, and there's a whole host of people who believe in a spherical Earth. And both of these tribes of people are 100% convicted with the idea that they're right, that they have enough information to show and prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that they are absolutely correct. And so anyone who doesn't subscribe to their belief is an idiot, should be ostracized, should be marginalized, should be an outcast, should never be listened to. And see, this is how you take a group of people and you isolate and alienate them, because they will not hear any words but the words that they have subscribed to. They're living in an echo chamber. It doesn't dumb you down to become familiar with both the arguments of the flat Earth folks and the arguments of the spherical Earth folks, because they both have convincing arguments. And so it's a good idea to learn those arguments. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. The point being, it's a good idea to learn them. Just like if you're going to go and study many cultures of people, it doesn't mean you're going to take on their traditions. It doesn't mean that you're going to take on their gods and their ideas of life, but you're going to be exposed to their traditions, to their gods, to their ontologies, which will expand your mind. That's called a well-rounded education. You are not just learning the stuff you're going to fully buy into, but you're also learning the stuff that you would never buy into, because that makes you a smarter person. It makes you a wiser, more refined individual, because you have not spent your life rejecting everything that you just don't see, that you don't agree with, which makes you enslaved to your own mind. And that's really what this group has effectively done, is enslave us to doctrines that are false, doctrines about ourselves and doctrines about the world, whether that be a medical doctrine, a religious doctrine, a scientific doctrine, whatever the case may be. These groups have worked extremely hard to hold us in contempt to the doctrines that they have foisted upon us. Okay, so the way we're going to break out of that is we're going to expose ourselves, that's the whole point of what I'm doing here, expose ourselves to a different reality, and therefore a larger reality. And that's exactly what Cliff High's Walk Without Rhythm essay does. So I'm going to post this essay. Here it is. It reads from left to right. And if you want, you can just simply pause the video at each one of these slides, and you can take the time for yourself to read it. And what this is going to do is this is going to help you see the world from a different perspective than the one that you grew up in, than the one that was indoctrinated into you. And that's a good idea, because then you can relate to others who maybe have subscribed to this, and you don't ostracize and alienate yourself from everybody who knows these or believes these ideas that Cliff is expressing here to be true. What I would like to say, as we finish up this last slide, what I would like to say is, the theory that Cliff holds, and I'm going to talk about this here next, the theory that Cliff holds really substantiates and brings understanding to some of the major questions we have as a human culture, whether it be a religious or scientific consideration. Meaning, the theory that Cliff has answers to why we have a fused chromosome, to why we are structurally unfit for the gravitational pull of this planet. And it accounts and resolves this intermediary type of situation that we're living in, meaning that we have this layer of people, of institutions and groups of people who have been ruling over the planet for a very long time and holding us as a human society in developmental contempt. And so his accounting of our history really welcomes and integrates and coalesces well with this philosophy that really Watchers did come down, that really there was an intermingling and genetic shift and change of human beings, that the planet really was bombarded with all types of natural disaster, that completely shifted not only the atmosphere of the planet, but the history of those that inhabited the planet. And so we're going to talk about all of those issues today as we begin to search out and find out not only our history, but these groups of people, these families that have been ruling over us. I do believe we are edging closer to our real origin story, and Substack essays like those from Cliff High cause me to think it's closer than we realize. Like the universe, we are an organism in development, and our complexifying history is simply the path we have taken to become aware of ourselves. We chose a more difficult path than the universal average due to the compromised condition foisted upon us by horrific outside forces. Nothing that cannot be outdone, but the undoing will be costly. No pain, no gain. And again, this reflects what I said earlier. Everything that you learn in life that really matters, that has an influence, that really changes you as an individual, is costly. It requires a painful endeavor, enduring and working through and coming out the other side of some type of painful event, and typically many, many painful events. And often, the more painful events you endure and survive, the richer of an individual you become, the richer your character, the richer your perseverance, the richer and more deeply you see yourself and the world. And this is because nature doesn't hand itself to you. The true aspects and true measures of nature come through extremely difficult paths because they're hard to integrate. Because nature is so enormous, so overwhelmingly huge, that to begin to grasp just what we are, what you are as an individual, and the world that we live in, it takes everything that you have. And that's why you must empty yourself. You go through the process of what in the West is called kenosis, which is to self-empty. And by emptying of yourself, you no longer are self-consumed. One of the real tragedies of locking into one belief system is you become naturally self-consumed, because the only belief system that you'll subscribe to is the one that has consumed you. And so you live a life of self-consumption because you can't learn anything else. Your mind is already full. And so that's why that Eastern philosophy, which is to know anything, I must lose everything, that's just the Western way of kenosis, of what is called kenosis. It was called calcination in Gnosticism and alchemy. And this was the burning away of the assumptions of one's mind, the burning away of what you know as fact. And by burning away those aspects of your mind, you then actually can learn something. You then actually can learn something past what you have assumed to know.
70% of the population lives in a consensus state, which is basically a herd mentality. So these are the literal NPCs of the world. So they don't form independent thought. When they want to know what their opinions are on certain topics, they just look to the external world. So these kinds of people will tend to get the most offended when you present them certain views that go outside of their paradigm, because their beliefs actually represent unconscious security needs. So they unconsciously gain security in trusting the mainstream media, celebrities, the experts, the government. They basically can't really think for themselves, so they seek security in outsourcing their opinions to the outer world. And moving from this consensus herd mentality to the next stage, which is an individuated state, is actually often a traumatic process, because instead of trusting the external world like you always have, the government, the authorities, you actually have to learn how to trust self as an inner guidance system instead. And in order to do that, you actually have to decondition and undo a lot of what you thought was true about yourself and the world in the process. So this is a really alienating and lonely process by design, because in order to discover who you are, you actually have to separate from the herd to begin with. And the thing is, you can't actually force people out of this state. It has to come from an inner calling. So it has to come from them realizing that there is something different inside of them that can't be explained by the experts, science, celebrities, government. And in my view, it really takes a certain ripeness of the soul to even want to go down that path, because it's not easy. Most people will actually refuse the call of their individuation again and again and again, because their unconscious security needs to stay in the unknown, the known rather, of the consensus is so strong. So you don't want to hate them for that. It's actually a necessary stage in their own soul's development. And this is why trying to wake up family, friends, and others in general is almost always a failed project. And really, how I feel about it, the best thing you can do in these times is focus on your own soul evolution and find something unique about you that you can bring back to the world. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it is the most highly individuated and spiritualized people who actually create the next consensus. And they don't do this by forcefully trying to wake up the people who are asleep. They do this by bringing back their true essence, their true nature, and their soul gifts back to the consensus, where they can uplift, inspire, and show people there's a different way to be.
Cliff has a pretty far out theory about the origin of humans, which I won't detail, but it involves aliens from a distant galaxy seeding Earth with adult breeding pairs of humans long before written history, some 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Those were the first untainted versions of humans. We were left to develop on our own in the garden that is the Earth. This begins to open up questions about Earth's history, and in order to know Earth's history, you're going to have to open up to ideas that are maybe outside the normal bounds that you've accepted. As part of our origin scenario, Cliff suggests the idea of an evil alien species called the Elohim, who came or fell here and manipulated our DNA through interbreeding and genetic manipulation. Enoch called them the Watchers. Now, one thing to mention here, and this is key, they came or fell here and manipulated our DNA through interbreeding and genetic manipulation. Now remember, this would have been then, according to this theory, this would have been the second intervention by an alien force. The first one being our original creation, and I'm following this narrative. The first one being our original creation, and then there being a fall that changed our genetics, and then there's a second quote-unquote creation that happens after the cataclysm, after this massive shift that happened to us and to the planet. And so this narrative really follows well even the scriptural idea that there was an original creation of human beings and then a second creation of human beings. So this common thread you're beginning to see and pattern you see in our history is that there was an original form of human beings that was directly from the work of an alien species, and then there was a parasite that came in and manipulated us at the genetic level, shortened our lives, lowered our brain capacity, and psychologically devalued us as individuals, meaning our mind, constricted our minds. And this points to the Elohim are essentially a demonoid species from another dimension who have defiled nature God by manipulating our DNA. And see, this points to what I like to call, and what I'll get into here, this points to what I like to call the original sin. And this was the original, in my argument, this was the original blasphemy of nature against God. The Elohim demons came here long ago to manipulate our DNA and enslave us by compromising our practical awareness, our mind, while keeping our God awareness coding, our spiritual sense, intact. DNA carries the coding to develop the material biology that allows for a sense of a larger reality than the material landscape. Altering our DNA disempowered our development while not compromising our etheric sensitivity, creative force. They dumbed us down. They lowered the capacity of our brain down to, just 5-6%. They shortened our life. We were living probably about 1,000 years. So how much wisdom can you acquire in, say, 80, 90 years in comparison to how much you could acquire in, say, 900 to 1,200 years? You see, you'd be so incredibly wise by the end of your life, no one would be able to con or convince you of anything that's false, because you will have enough wisdom from the road to know the shit from Shinoa. And so that etheric sensitivity is the key to all that. And so even though we were dumbed down biologically, we spiritually remain sensitive, and that is by design. That is, they purposefully did that because these creatures eat God. And the reason why they prey upon us is to get access to this love and compassion energy that they cannot access. We are the intermediaries, meaning we allow them access to a form of God they cannot access on their own. And that is why we were farmed. That is why the children are tortured. The innocence is stolen from children, and all of this whole idea of downgrading the human being. This is so that they can continue to consume that innocence. We give them access to God because as pure evil, they cannot access love. And so they access that love through the consumption of children, through the consumption of the blood that is love that flows through us. You see? The Elohim were actually the ones who committed the original sin, and I mentioned this earlier. They committed the original sin. They blasphemed nature by altering our DNA. They altered the image of God by manipulating the DNA of an authentic being in development. This is a defilement of nature, God, the universe. Your DNA is your biological image of nature, God. And to manipulate this is to manipulate the work of the creative force.
DNA is just an abbreviation for a much longer name, deoxyribonucleic acid. That's what DNA stands for. Now, deoxy, see, that's a Latin root. If you trace its meaning, it means God. So deoxyribo. In the Semitic languages, ribo is the same as rabbi. Or in Arabic, we say rab. It means the master, the Lord. So here we have deoxyribo, God, Lord, and master, nucleic acid. Nucleic means at the center, and acid is like chemical fire. So deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. What does it mean? God, Lord and master, the fire at the center of my being.
Nature is the creative force or God manifesting, incarnating, transmogrifying into material matter. To coerce the creative force genetically is to blaspheme the work of God. If I'm an abuser and I want to hold my victim in contempt and I want them to remain my victim, I blame them for the abuses that I put upon them. So I tell them it's their fault if I'm the abuser. I tell the victim, my victim, I tell them that it's their fault that they're being punished because they did something bad. And so they deserve the punishment that they're getting. And eventually the victim will believe it. They'll believe that they deserve to be abused. And in this same way, this is what's happened. We have been blamed for separating from God, whereas they were the ones who did the original manipulation. And so they, meaning the Elohim, are projecting their crime, their sin, their evil upon us, just like an abuser projects their own evil upon their victim.
When you understand this one thing, you will understand everything about this reality that we live in called the Matrix, including our governments and the way society functions. And this one thing is summed up in 2 words: victim consciousness. The government and all of the ruling elite need you to believe that you are a victim. Now you can deep dive down the rabbit hole of your consciousness and contemplation and philosophy and all of the other things and begin to understand this is at the core of all religions and all governments. It's why they removed God from us and made God separate to us, something outside of you, something outside of me. Because if it was outside of us, they could then control how we access it. And if they can control how they access it, aka God, aka through priests, through religions, through the Bibles. Back in the day, you had to speak Latin to be able to even read the Bible, right? It couldn't be printed in English because they were gatekeeping access to God. Why? Because when you understand that you can access God in one place and only one place, and that is within you, through your own heart, through your own portal in here, through your own consciousness, through your own connection, and you begin to understand that there is no separation between you and God, you begin to understand that you are divine. When you begin to understand that you are divine, you begin to understand that you are not a victim, that nobody can control you, that your rights that constitutions give you are fucking unalienable. They are God-given. They are divine. They are because you are. Their whole system of class, of hierarchy is based on one thing. It's based on you believing and seeing yourself as a victim that needs someone to govern you. You need someone to save you. You need someone to figure it out for you. You need someone to whatever, right? This is the whole fucking welfare state, you guys. If you start to pick at this thread, you will begin to unravel the entire fabric of this quote unquote reality that we live in.
You see, it's a deception. And so all of Western religion was built on this idea, that you're guilty at birth, was built on this idea that simply because you're born from people that thought for themselves, you also are tainted. You see, and so this is how you carry this prostrated spirituality over thousands of years within the human society. You have people that could develop past this idea, but you hold that society in contempt by making them think that they're guilty, by making them think that they're the reason why they're separated from God. Whereas the truth of the matter is there is no such thing as separation. And even though we were genetically modified, there's still no separation from the creative force, from God, because we have love and compassion within us. Okay, so this is one of the ways psychologically we have been preyed upon by this group. How do you do that genetically? Well, Cliff High has an idea. Next slide. It was a simple fix. They burned out the second chromosome and fused the junction where it used to be with the non-activating codon. Thus, the order of processing of the gene sequence was changed, with third chromosome becoming number 2. The totality of chromosomes was reduced from 24 to 23. Look up here in the top right. Human chromosome 2 was formed by the head-to-head fusion of 2 ancestral chromosomes that remain separated in other primates, meaning it's not natural. This was done, and it's not going to happen again because it was done in the lab. What this is basically saying in science and biology is, look here, there's been a fusion that has happened in our chromosomes. If we look at the next slide, at the end of your chromosomes are telomeres, okay? And these are like a sealing edge for the tube that holds your DNA. Inside that chromosome is your DNA, the map that is you, that map that creates you. And so at the end of the tube are caps, so that the DNA strands that are inside the tube don't fray, come out, and spill out and are destroyed, okay? And so are metabolized. And so what you see here genetically is you see 2 heads that have been fused together. Look here on the left, human chromosome number 2. What do you see? You see 2 telomere heads that have been fused together. Folks, that's laboratory work. That's not natural work happening in nature. That's laboratory manipulation, genetic manipulation of our chromosome. That's what's happening there. You have something that has come in, my argument is that it's a species, has come in who are genetic geniuses, and they have bonded these 2 telomeres. And what this shows you is, first of all, this wouldn't have happened. This doesn't happen in evolution. Okay, so that brings a huge question then to the evolutionary theory. And then this, if you were a God creating a human being or a being, you would never leave this kind of signature in your work. It would be like Chip Foose. You know who Chip Foose is? Chip Foose is a dude that restores old cars, makes absolutely beautiful hot rods out of old cars. So let's say like you're Chip Foose and you're restoring a 32 Ford, and so you've got awesome V8 engine in it, you paint it beautiful candy red, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, spotless over the whole thing, and then you leave a door dent with a little bit of rust on the driver's side door. That's what this telomere head-to-head fusion is like. It's like if Chip Foose restored a car, but left, as a mark on his signature, left a dent and rust on the driver's side door. Sure, the car's going to get A to B. Sure, it's going to be able to drive and go anywhere you need it to go. But would Chip Foose have ever left that ding and rust in the door if he's restoring the whole car from tires to the roof? Never. He would never do that. And if you are a deity, a god, and you're creating a human being or a being, you would never, ever, ever do this. This is crude. This is crude biology. This is crude, forced biology. It's the signature of a psychopath. It's not the signature of a deity. So right there is evidence that something else is going on. There is a larger scheme at work that's being kept from you. So, and here's one of the great things about knowing who you are. By finding this out about yourself, you now know a perspective about yourself that you were unaware of before you started this video. And that's why it's valuable to you, because this is evidence you carry. You carry the evidence that you've been genetically manipulated. It is in your DNA. That is not the work of a divine God, and that is not the work of evolution. It's neither. Which points to an origin for us as human beings, which is different, very different than what you have become accustomed. This is one of the reasons why this changeover has taken so long. Because there are, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying there's a very real possibility of this, that if this is the case, how many people can handle that in society? How many people can roll with that reality and totally accept it? And a great example I give for that is, to be able to accept this situation is, doesn't really matter what your origin is. Does it really matter to your value? Are you less valuable because you find out this about your origin? Does that make you any less value? In the same way, if you have an orphan who doesn't know who their parents are, and you have a child who doesn't know who their parents are, is either child more valuable than the other? Simply because one doesn't know who their parents are and one does that change their value at all? No, it doesn't at all. So this doesn't change your value. That's one of the ways you can accept and swallow this science. This doesn't change your value because you carry consciousness within you. You're a miracle. The fact that you come from a genetic manipulation doesn't change the fact that you're a miracle. Doesn't change the fact that you are a conscious, eternal being having a material experience in time. You are a timeless being having an experience in time. Does it matter at all whatsoever that your history may contain some genetic manipulation? Does that devalue it all? So we genetically were modified. They took us, our perfect, probably multi-strand, like right now we have a double helix DNA. We have a 2-strand DNA that is held together in a crystalline structure with water and vibration. And the theory is that that used to be something like a 10-strand, 12-strand, 15-strand, maybe 30-strand DNA. This next slide. It was the original species of humans these extraterrestrial Elohim demonoids manipulated to form us as we are today, a short-lived, DNA-compromised, brain-decapacitated species. This explains our only using 5 to 8% of our brain's capacity, why 95% or more of our DNA is considered useless junk, why our second chromosome is fused. We are getting to the origins of why things are the way that they are, which lead to how and who made things the way that they are. You see? Is this the great secret that cannot be divulged to anyone for fear society would collapse? Is this the answer to why our planet has been turned into a human farm? Are the Elohim demons the parasitic species that has held human development in check for over 10,000 years? To wit, is the Khazarian Mafia the intermediating society used by the leader of the Elohim, Lucifer, to con and steer the world into eternal self-enslavement? It's beginning to look like that's the case. From what I have researched through the testimonies of satanic ritual abuse survivors, Jay Parker, Kathy O'Brien, banker Ronald Bernard, former satanic and Catholic priests Mark Passio and John Spong, autodidact Jordan Maxwell, survivors of intense CP, Kurt Barker and the Hampstead children, women who were child breeders for sacrifice, Teresa from the 60 Minutes interview, I can show you if you want, I have discovered the following. I've discovered these things from studying the testimonies and hearing the testimonies of these people. The Amalekite, Khazarian, Luciferian, Masonic groups have anthropomorphized the Elohim into Lucifer, whom they worship as God. In exchange for raping and murdering children during ritual sacrifices, devotees to evil are given wealth, power, long life, prestige, and public notoriety. We've been marginalized with abuse bonds, pacified with false religions, coerced with harmful medicine, mugged with pernicious usury, and distracted with red herrings. The science, medical, judicial, political, religious, sport, and financial worlds are all direct and unmistakable testimonies to what Khazarians call Babylonian money magic. It dates back to Babylon, Amalek, and the bloodlines of Esau and the Canaanites. And here we're going to begin to get into the bloodlines directly. So looking real quickly at, again, the image from Dylan Monroe, look at the very top here, Cult of Baal. What is the entire world set upon? Baal worship, and human sacrifice. And from these two energies, Baal worship and human sacrifice, we get the Canaanites, the Pharaohs, the kings of Babylon. That's the beginning. Okay, and so we're going to go back to that origin here in a minute. But the entire world, what needs to be understood here, in my opinion, and the opinion of all these people that I've mentioned before in this other slide here, these are the groups that rule the world, and they come out of these human sacrificing, Baal worshipping groups, which are direct descendants of the Nephilim, the Watchers, the fallen angels, the group that genetically modified us. Through blood communion with Lucifer, hell-bent societies learned and honed mind-destroying techniques to disempower humanity. History, science, medicine, religion, and therefore the human race were twisted to the will and destiny of Lucifer and his devotees. And then I take a quote here from The Hidden History of the Incredibly Evil Khazarian Mafia, the essay I'm going to read at the end. The Khazarian Mafia used their vast fortune to enter into a new system of banking based on secret Babylonian black magic, money magic, that they claim to have learned from the evil spirits of Baal in return for their many child sacrifices to him. So how was the world taken over? These groups formed a relationship, cultivated, fostered a relationship with evil, with pure evil. And that evil taught them, this is how you manipulate humankind. This is how you manipulate the money systems. This is how you manipulate religious systems. This is how you manipulate medical systems. You take these societies that rule humanity, put them in authority, and then whatever those authorities say is what all of society follows. So if those authorities are corrupted, which they are, then all of society becomes corrupted, because the only medicine, history, science, religion that all of society knows is the ones that have been given to them, handed down to them by the leadership. And look at history. Look at history. Look at what's in the center of this artwork. The Vatican. The Vatican. Rome never fell. See there on the left? It never fell. It combined with Judea to form the Roman Catholic Church. This is a power institution. And then out of that became the rulers of the world. Look, the Khazars, the Khazarian Mafia, the Knights Templar. These are the rulers of the world, the Masons, the Jesuits. Then Switzerland in 1291, that marks the beginning of the financial takeover of the world. Black nobility. The nobility that you don't know and that you've never heard about. That's when they took over the world, right here, 1291. This is self-organizing. What you see is evil self-organizing. The earth, nature, is a self-organizing institution, so to speak. So whatever energy is put into power, that energy will self-organize, because nature doesn't have an opinion. It just simply foments what is being instigated, what is being encouraged, and it will simply follow that pattern, because everything is frequency. And so these groups have simply developed a current, a pattern that all of the world has followed. And so all of the world is blinded by this pattern, is blinded by this resonant frequency, this evil that they have instigated. The intermediaries, Cain, Ham, Esau, the Amalekites, the Canaanites, the Babylonian kings, Byzantine rulers, Roman emperors, the Phoenicians, the Khazars, the Pope, the Black Pope, the Illuminati, black nobility, and the Order of the Black Snake. These are the people and societies who have held a continuing relationship with true evil since the Younger Dryas. If you don't know what the Younger Dryas is, I'm going to tell you here in a minute. But this slide is pointing back to this group. Here, look. See these groups above? You see, and this hidden nobility is what has been steering us. Those are the groups that I just listed them right there. And they have been the intermediaries for the world as we know it today. And this all began at the Younger Dryas. What is the Younger Dryas? The Younger Dryas was a massive cataclysm. The Younger Dryas cataclysm was a 3-mile wide white-hot meteor that struck the 7-mile thick Greenland ice sheet 13,000 years ago. It blew out a 19-mile wide crater that launched building-sized ice blocks into 8-minute flight trajectories. A 1,000-foot ripple wall of meltwater, ice chunks, trees, and rubble crushed and covered all of North America and Europe with 300 to 600 feet of Earth. In my opinion, this was an attack. Here's the debris field. Here's the coverage field. Here's the crater on the left, you can see. And basically what you see in that field, the Younger Dryas debris field, this shows all of the world that was affected, that was covered over in massive amounts of earth, and then also flooded because we had so much meltwater that formed from the cataclysm. It actually changed the atmosphere of the earth. The earth's atmosphere changed. If we look at this map here, what we see is the earth as it is now, so meters below sea level. So water level is normal in this photo. This is from the NASA website. And then what we see is when the before the flood came, before the Younger Dryas, the earth probably looked a lot more like this. Now look, the brown part is land, and you can see how the landmass right up there in Alaska and Siberia, look how it's connected. You see how look at England. The UK is basically no longer an island. You see this changed everything. And then everything you see in the west there, look at the debris field. Everything in the west and all of North America, Mexico, all the way to South America was covered up in earth. You've seen pictures of a buried planet that most likely was from that time, from the Younger Dryas, because it buried the earth in so much land. It buried all the land in so much mass. And then the flooding, the earth was flooded. And so you had a change, a complete transformation that happened at the Younger Dryas. And what this did, if we look at the timeline here that I've made, what the Younger Dryas did is it mixed up all the history so that it became very difficult to know what happened before the flood, because the flood, the Younger Dryas cataclysm, wiped out all that history and quote unquote muddied it up, because it covered the earth with hundreds of feet of mud. And this mud flood, we know for a fact, happened around 11,800 or so BC, right around there. It happened. We know it happened. And we know that it covered up human habitats and fortresses and so forth because they're buried and we're uncovering them. You can see, I mean, the pyramids at Giza are not the only pyramids on the planet. There are pyramids everywhere on this planet. They are all over the place. And what this is pointing towards is a great cataclysm that stopped a development that was happening with humanity on this planet. You see that it was infiltrated. A terrible event happened, wiped out that culture, and then we were genetically manipulated. I came across a great slide from Cliff High that shows this. And if you look here at this slide, it shows it's a timeline that's following the vibrations of the galactic center. And as we go in and out of the plane of the galactic center, we increase and decrease our vibration as the planet goes up and down through the galactic plane. Cliff isn't a Flat Earth subscriber. Now, since the writing on this is really small and hard to read, I'll just summarize the key points of what it says. 43,000 BC, pyramid civilizations founded. 11,500 BC, invasion of Earth by the Elohim, which was the Younger Dryas cataclysm, according to this chart. Antarctica was frozen, the Sahara and Gobi deserts were created, global coastal island civilizations flooded. 4,791 BC, Elohim capture Yemeni tribes. 2,700 BC, Elohim capture Mesoamericans and establish human colonies from central North America through all of South America. 2004 BC, Babylon founded based on money magic schemes taught by the Elohim, and AD 100, Khazarian Mafia Empire formally begins. What the evidence is showing us and what we're pulling out of the ground is showing us is that actually we go far beyond the 10,000 BC startup of pre-ancient Egypt. Now, around 10,000 BC, to follow this real quickly, around 10,000 BC is the development of agriculture. What I found when I was doing all of this research was that there was great disagreement among PhDs as to when the West began to develop, as to how and what the West came out of. But really, this is the beginning of human beings after the cataclysm, after the flood, when all of human beings were wiped out. And then we were genetically manipulated, taught agriculture, witchcraft, and all these things from the Watchers. And then from that, we then begin to develop the dominator cultures that come out of Sumer. This is why the West was dominator-oriented, was because it was already infiltrated by the Nephilim. And this is where I'm going to get great disagreement from a lot of folks, but after Cain killed Abel, supposedly in the mythos of Eden, he went to a city called Nod that was fully, it was running. It was an entire society of people. And supposedly Adam and Eve and their kids, Cain and Abel and Seth, this was the beginning of all human beings. And so there's a huge problem in the biblical accounting in that, where did all these people in Nod come from? But yet that fits really nicely into the mythos of that human beings were already thriving long before the flood. And there were definitely groups of people, cities of people, organizations of people that outside of this Noah and Adam and Eve mythos. And you begin to see the tie-in between these two non-cohesive ideas of human origin. And the Great Flood is the reason why there's that disagreement, passionate disagreement with people in the 6,000 BC beginnings of human beings and the 250,000 BC beginnings of human beings. And these two groups are as non-interchangeable as the flat earthers and spherical earthers. You're not going to get either of these groups to give in to the other. And so we're simply going to have to wait and find out what the truth is as it comes out over the next few years. And so if we look at the bloodline here of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, their kids, their sons, there's great discrepancy as to the order of birth of those kids, even among PhDs. I heard strong arguments that Japheth was second. I heard strong arguments that Ham was second. I even heard arguments that Japheth was first and Shem was second. So there's all kinds of discrepancy, and the reason for that is, again, the flood. The flood marked up and marred up all this history. So we see there's two Lamechs, there's two Nemahs, there's two Enochs. Enoch obviously wrote the book of Enoch, and Enoch talks about the Watchers. We see Noah is born in 2600 BC, Abraham in 2000 BC, Esau, Eliphaz are all in the 1800s. This is the development of the Levant. And to give you an idea where on the map the Levant is, it is here. Right north of Egypt, just south of Turkey, modern day. Ancient Egypt and or ancient Anatolia and Mesopotamia, this is where the Levant was. If we look at this little map here showing Khazaria, we see the Levant right there at the Mediterranean Sea. And we see the Khazaria developing between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. We know genetically we have DNA that shows the Canaanites, the Canaanite bloodlines live on in modern Arabs and Jews. And the ones that had the most Canaanite blood was up here in Khazaria. The Canaanites moved out of the Levant area and slowly migrated, the evil ones slowly migrated up north of the Caucasus Mountains between the Black Sea and Caspian Sea and joined into the Khazarians. That's where the ancient bloodline is. Now, looking at the family lineage, and what we find is the bloodline of Ham was sort of the dark bloodline of Noah. Ham is basically the grandfather of the Canaanites. And then we also see, which is really interesting, within Shem's bloodline, Jacob and Esau. As you know, Jacob was second-born and Esau was firstborn. Esau was a hairy, red-colored individual. And these two, Esau and Jacob, were fighting interminably inside the womb. And when they came out, Esau was first, and hanging onto his heel was Jacob. Must have been quite a birth, incredibly painful. And what we see eventually is that deception, because eventually Jacob deceived his father so that he could get the inheritance that was owed to Esau. And this great deception is what formed the rift between the Canaanites and the Israelites. And we see off of the bloodline of Esau, we have Eliphaz. Eliphaz had sexual relations with Timnah, who was a concubine, which gave birth to Amalek. We know for a fact that the Khazarian mafia bloodlines go back to the Amalekites because many of the people who testified that were involved in CP and satanic ritual abuse claim that their abusers said that they were from the bloodline of Amalek and the Amalekites, which ties them directly into the Canaanites, which ties them into the Khazarian mafia. Now, something that everyone needs to understand very clearly. The Khazarian mafia is a group of bloodlines. It is not a singular bloodline. There are a few very powerful bloodlines within this group, But the vast majority of the Khazarian Mafia are people who have grouped together with these same usurpative ideas of human existence, these same ideas of rulership over all humanity, and these same ideas of we are going to be and remain in power, and everyone else is simply the cattle that we feed off of and control. Okay, that group is called the Khazarian Mafia, and it all comes out of this genealogy from Noah and from Ham and from the ancient bloodlines of the Nephilim, the fallen angels. The story of that is you had these watchers, these multidimensional beings that quote-unquote fell or came to earth. They then manipulated genetically the human race. They changed our coding, dumbed us down and so forth. I talked about all of it already. They came here and did all that. And they eventually left. They eventually didn't stay and left this technology, this human rulership technology, in the hands of the Nephilim, these giant human beings that came out of their copulating with women. And that became the script that the Khazarian Mafia would follow. And through their convening, their continuing convening with the devil, with Lucifer, Baal, Molech, their continuing convening with that higher force, they then use that evil force to rule and take over the planet. Now, the Khazarian Mafia is not composed of a single bloodline, but a family of bloodlines that trace back to the Canaanites. The Canaanites come out of the bloodline of Esau. Esau fathered the chiefs of Edom, who became the Canaanites, eternal haters of the Israelites, who are the bloodline of Jacob, the deceiver. The Canaanites, like any mafia, were a society of people from many families, not one family alone. There certainly is royalty and hierarchy within the society, but they all bow to the same evil god. This is reiterating what I talked about just a moment ago with the Canaanites, and the Canaanites carrying the bloodline of the Khazarian Mafia, the bloodline of the Nephilim, which is the bloodline of the Watchers. Noah's first son was Shem, and he claimed to be the father of all Semites. Japheth was Noah's second son, and was the grandfather of Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz's son was Khazar, a patriarch of the Khazarian kingdom. Ham was Noah's last son. Ham means hot, warm, or sunburnt. I think that points to red skin and Esau. I think that's the same genetic. I think that genetic that comes out of Ham and that genetic that comes out of Shem was found in this red bloodline. And that formed Edom, which then moved up and became the Khazarian nation on our map. Ham had 4 sons, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Mizraim is the grandfather of the Philistines, and Canaan the grandfather of the Canaanites. Esau, the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham, was the founder of Edom, which means red, and the Edomites, who were long haters of the Hebrews, Jacob's lineage. It was from this group, the Edomites, that begat Herod the Great, the same Roman Jewish Herod that tried to kill infant Jesus and whose son lopped off the head of John the Baptist. Here you can see that right in the Roman Empire, here we can see it. We can see the Khazarian Mafia at work. Canaan, the grandson of Noah, settled in the Levant and founded the Canaanites. Canaan's grandson was Nimrod, the king of Babel. He built the Tower of Babel and the city of Nineveh. The line of Ham eventually became the Philistines in 1170 BC, the greatest enemy of the lineage of Jacob, harkening all the way back to the stolen birthright of Isaac, something that I want to mention here. Isn't it interesting that the nation of Israel was born out of deception? Because Jacob didn't deserve the birthright of Esau. He got it because he deceived. He deceived his father and he deceived his brother. That anger and hatred in Esau passed down into his sons, grandsons, great-grandsons, Amalek being one of them. And they carried that hatred because the land, the inheritance, was to be theirs. It had been stolen by their father's brother, you see. And that, even though the Bible says they made up, trust me, that lost inheritance, that lost power, the lost land, that everything that was lost because of that deception fed the anger and hatred that fueled the Canaanites. It all goes back to that deception. And I just find it very interesting that all the nation of Israel, supposedly the nation after God's heart, was born of deception, is a nation that's there because of a huge deceit that took place in its history. The Amalekite nation is from the bloodline of Esau. Esau's son Eliphaz, ancestor of the Edomites, and his concubine Timnah were the parents of Amalek. Amalek founded the Amalekites, drinkers of blood. Timnah was a Horite, a Canaanite, and sex mistress, and so made Amalek an illegitimate child by Hebrew tradition. The Amalekites were Canaanites, and they were descendants of Ham. Amalek carried great disdain and hatred for the descendants of Jacob, the Israelites, because Jacob deceived his great-grandfather Isaac and stole the birthright that would have been his grandfather's, Esau. This was the hatred that forged the Amalekite nation and drove them against the bloodline of Jacob, the Israelites. The Amalekites were renowned sorcerers and used witchcraft and blood sacrifice to drive their sick way of life. They were known to shapeshift and take forms of animals to escape capture. This notion may have come out of their vast knowledge of the plant kingdom and how to use hallucinogenic plant substances to fool an enemy. This is interesting in that that information came out of a scholar of the Amalekites, and what's really interesting is it ties directly into this whole idea of nature and hallucinogenic plant substances being used against people. We know that Esau was a man of the field and a cultivator of the land, and within the kingdom of the kingdom of phyla of plants, there are hallucinogenic properties. There are hallucinogenic chemicals, and this group supposedly became a master of understanding how to use hallucinogenic plant medicines to manipulate and harm people. So just like sugar can be made to make something taste very sweet, well, sugar is also a highly addictive drug. You see, same thing with caffeine. It can give you all kinds of energy, but it's also highly addictive. And so in the same way, hallucinogenic plants can be really helpful to a person's psychology in breaking through old thoughts that are hard to get out of your mind and assumptions, right? They're very good at that, but then they can also be used in an adulterous way. They could be used to harm someone greatly. And it's thought that the Amalekites really fostered this. They really worked on and developed an understanding of how to use plants to manipulate other people, and so to get their will. And so what I heard was this incredible story, moving into Khazaria now. The Amalekites moved up from the Levant, there next to the Mediterranean Sea, up north into Khazaria. And so there is, within this nation of people, this real strong understanding of plant herbs and how to use them to your advantage. And this then was carried out in a story that Cliff High described, which actually got me going on this essay originally. And the reason why it did was because it tied directly to another story that was the same story that I found in a book that's unrelated to Cliff, this book here, Cannibalism, Blood Drinking, and High Adept Satanism. Kurth told a story in his book that he wrote quite a while ago that matched the exact behavior of the Khazarians that Cliff High described in his story. And I knew there was no way that these stories were unrelated because they were so sick. They were so disgusting and morbid that I knew there's no way that could have been brought up by these two different societies to be the exact same way that they operate. So it opened a door for me. It opened a door for me as far as understanding the Khazarian mafia by hearing the story, because it not only told me how terrible, how horrible they are, but their actual actions, which match to the human trafficking stories I've been getting out of the tunnels that are being captured right now in our modern society today. And so it all just brought it together for me. But I'll tell you, the story is that Kurth, from this book, Kurth described in his youth, he was in the CP world. He had been thrust into that world through his uncle, who was tied to a high-ranking official in the Khazarian mafia. And Kurth was just a young boy, 5 or 6 years old, and was being raised by Christian parents who were totally unaware of this other world society that their son was being manipulated and used in right under their watch. They were completely aware because this group so early captures the mind of their abused. So Kurth, as a child, never communicated to his parents that he was being used in ritual abuse settings for Satanism. And so he grew up in this incredibly bipolar world where on one side he's going to church and he's being taught in the ways of Western religion, and then literally during the week and at other weekends, whatever, when his parents aren't around, his uncle is taking him to these child sacrifice rituals and these insanely disgusting rituals that these people take part in. Okay, so there were two stories that struck me. Okay, so just make sure there are no kids around. He, as a child, was put into the CP world as an infant. He was taken as an infant before he even spoke. I mean, this is when he was literally an infant, just a few months old. Kurth was taken into these ritualistic settings and abused. And during that time, I'm really sorry to tell this story, during that time, photographs were taken of these situations. So the photographs that were taken, this is old school, this is back in the 70s and 60s when there wasn't any digital photography. So this is hard film that this stuff is on. And so these sick people would have collections, photographs of children who were in the midst of being raped and tortured and murdered by these people. Kurth, was in one of the pictures that was highly sought after by these collectors of CP. And so in one of the occasions, he was taken by his uncle with this high-ranking official in the Khazarian mafia to the home of a couple that were collectors of CP. They wanted him because they wanted him to autograph, they wanted Kurth to autograph a photo of when he was in some type of ritual, and there was a black demon form shadow that was coming out from the wall with its hands open to receive Kurth, and a photograph was taken at that moment. And these sick people wanted Kurth to autograph the photo so that the photo would then become more valuable and they would be able to sell it for a higher price. This is the world. Okay. While he was there, this is unbelievable. While Kurth was there at their house, this couple described to him as a child what they did for food. And in the midst of this meal that they were eating, and this was a sick couple, they described how they would find people down by the beach. This was in Southern California. They would find homeless families down at the beach. And they would tell them, hey, we've got a nice home in the hills. We care about you. We really want to help you. We know that you're really destitute. We're going to help you find a job. And we've been watching you guys for a while now, and we think you would be perfect. And so we'd love to take you to our house. We'll give you a meal, and we'll feed your kids, and we're going to get you a job. We're going to get you guys back on your feet. Okay. So this sick couple, this Khazarian couple, would then get this family to hop in the van, and they would take them up to the hills where they lived in Southern California. And when they got them to the house, they then would act like they're going to be all friendly and all this stuff. And then they would capture them one at a time and take them into a room and tie them to the wall. And it would be a father, a mother, and then however many kids they have. And please, no kids should be around, okay? This is unbelievable. They would torture the father in front of the mom and the kids, and then they would kill him. And then they would torture the mother in front of the kids while the dad's dead. And they then would begin to peel their skin off and begin to eat the meat raw in front of the kids. and then they would torture the kids and eat the kids. And the meat that they had at the meal they were eating there with Kurth was meat that they had frozen from their harvesting. And the reason they did that was because it made the meat sweeter. It made the meat taste better. It was full of adrenaline. It was a drug. They would drain the blood from the kids and drink that blood. And this story completely matched, almost word for word, the story that Cliff High then told months later as I was researching this stuff. And this gets us to 100 AD and how the Khazarian nation grew. The way the Khazarian nation became the powerhouse that it became in history was because they took over the trade routes that came out of China. If you look at this map here, this is from 100 AD. This is about when it started. You have the Eastern Han Dynasty, and you have the Kush Empire and these empires in India that are spiced. And then you have the Chinese who are developing all kinds of silks and fabrics. And so you have caravans of families that will make all these spices and fabrics and so forth, and they'll load all their goods that they've been making for a few years onto their carts. And then they would begin this long journey from China all the way to Western Europe. Yes, all the way to Spain and the UK, or what became the UK. These Western empires just north of the Mediterranean. And to get there, though, look how you would have to travel directly over the Caspian and Black Sea. As these families were traveling from China and India and passing through this area of Khazaria, the Khazarian people, like a family, would find a traveling group and say, hey, we know you guys are really tired. You've been traveling for thousands of miles. We live here in this area, and we're happy to put you up for just a few dollars. We'll set you up. We'll get you a nice meal tonight, a good place to bed to sleep in. You'll feel a lot better in a couple days, and you can be on your way. And we're happy to do this. It's just part of our helping and being neighborly, okay? So the group, the family, would believe them, and they would follow them to their place, and that night they would make them a big meal. The Khazarians would make them a big meal, and they'd get them nice and full, and they would also they would get them drunk, and they would lace their food with plant hallucinogens because they had learned that technology, right? And so they would get these people in a mind state whereby they would tell their whole life story. They would tell where they're from. They would tell all the merchants that they deal with in China, all the family and everything about them, all the names, ages, and all that good stuff. And then after a night or two, they then would tie up all the family. And then the Khazarians would then torture them in front of the kids. They would first torture the father, and then they would torture the mother, and then they would torture the kids and kill them. And what they would do is they would carry out this same technology we now see happening of what they do to children to draw adrenaline out of them and to draw hallucinogenic properties out of their blood. And that's by convincing the child or convincing the victim that they're going to die. So the initial part of the ritual, a part of the torture, is just simply physical attack. You just are physically doing torturous proceedings to the body so that the person is filled with adrenaline. And then after that, you then convince, as the abuser, you then convince that victim that they're going to die. And so they no longer are in this mindset of being focused on the adrenal portion. They're now moving into this depressive portion, which is they're believing and knowing that they're about to die. And this releases a whole different set of chemicals into the blood. So you have not only the adrenaline flowing through the blood, but you also have these other hallucinogenic properties of chemicals flowing through the blood. So that when the victim then, their blood is drained and drank, you get both the adrenaline effect as well as the hallucinogenic effect. And this is all technology, this is all human torturing and manipulating technology that has been passed down by these sick groups. And I heard this story from, and then after they had killed the family and drank their blood and ate their meat and all of that, they would take all their goods, and then they would travel to where they had described that they were going. So the Khazarians would then take all this information they had got from them after they had gotten them drunk and filled with hallucinogenic medicines. They take that information, they take all their goods, and they would sell them to posing as that family, posing with the names and everything of that family. So the folks in the West thought it was the same folks they had been communicating all this time that were in China. And so this is how they would put on disguises. The Khazarian mafia became very adept at putting on disguises and taking on a different role and a new name. And by doing that, you could then coerce even more people by posing that you're this helpful, caring individual, but really you're this sadistic murderer. And folks have no idea that you're the serial killer because you're so adept at putting on all these different costumes. And what do we see here in Dylan Monroe's map that he gave? Costumes. These groups have just simply been wearing costumes just like the ancient Khazarians did in Khazaria. They simply put on a costume of these, in this case, this helpful group that would help this family. And nowadays you have a government that poses as this helpful government, or a medical institution that poses as this helpful institution, or this religious group that poses as this helpful institution. And on the outside, and the mirage is that they're this helpful, human-oriented, compassionate, love-centered group that is there to totally help society, and we are the ones, or the caregivers, and we're going to help everybody. But behind that curtain is this sadistic murderer. And that's what we see in our governments now. That's what we see in the medical systems. Look at the medicine they use to treat people. They poison people to quote-unquote heal them. And it's the same thing with religion. They get people to believe certain characteristics about themselves, which poisons them. And then they offer them the only solution, which is the religious belief system. And it's the same with medicine. You pose this disease that they're going to get, and then you pose the only solution, which is this particular elixir that you inject. And it's the same thing with government. They pose as this helpful group, and after we have this war, you're going to have this peaceful society. It's going to be awesome because we're like this helpful society. When really all the government is doing is instigating war, as much as the medical institution is instigating disease, and as much as the spiritual institutions, the religious institutions, are instigating a degraded view of oneself, a compromised view of one's creative force, you see? And it's the same pattern of deception as what was going on with Esau and Jacob, as what was going on with the Khazarians and these people that traveled through, and as what was going on with Kurth Barker and his involvement with CP and the Luciferians that were talking to him. All these people are doing the same thing, posing as kind, humanitarian people, but they're vicious murderers. They're the exact antithesis of what they claim to be. And this is how you know this is the situation now that we've been in for over 10,000 years, is because it's the same patterns. It's the same patterns of harm. It's the same patterns of destruction that have been permeating our society since the very beginning. And this technology is what they used to harness all the money, harness all the power. And you're about to hear that story with this accounting that these two scholars have done for us. They have written the story. The gentlemen are, I mentioned them earlier, Preston James and Mike Harris, who wrote this essay called The Hidden History of the Incredibly Evil Khazarian Mafia. And it basically is going to walk you through 100 AD to modern time, and is going to show exactly how they not only infiltrated the West, but they infiltrated all of the ruling families. They infiltrated all of the money. They infiltrated all of the religions. They infiltrated all of the medicine. I mean, heck, even in 1913, you have Rockefeller establish the American Cancer Society to shut down naturopathy. One of the first prerogatives, desires, and he even said it, one of the first things he wanted to do was to get rid of this quote-unquote witchcraft, which is what they wanted to do, to move people away from using plant medicines to heal people, to moving to using oil-based, pharma, petrol-based chemicals to quote-unquote heal the body, which is an adulteration, which is a blasphemy against nature. Here Rockefeller is posing as this humanitarian, this person who wants to raise money to heal people, whereas the whole thing is a Ponzi scheme.
Around the same time that John D. Rockefeller seized U.S. media, he also hijacked U.S. medicine. When it was discovered that drugs could be produced from petroleum, America's top oil mogul ordered his army of propagandists to invert reality accordingly. Medicines used for thousands of years were suddenly classified as alternative, while the new, petroleum-based, highly addictive, and patentable drugs were declared the gold standard. After buying a German pharmaceutical company that manufactured chemicals of war for Adolf Hitler, Rockefeller leveraged his political influence by pressing Congress to declare natural healing modalities unscientific quackery. Rockefeller then took control of the American Medical Association and began offering massive grants to top medical schools under the mandate that only his approved curriculum be taught. Any mention of the healing powers of herbs, plants, and diet was erased from most medical textbooks. Doctors and professors who objected to Rockefeller's plan were crucified by the media, removed from the AMA, and stripped of their license to teach and practice medicine. Those who dared to speak out were arrested and jailed. When evidence began to emerge that petroleum-based medicines were causing cancer, Mr. Rockefeller founded the American Cancer Society, through which he suppressed that information. John D. Rockefeller is duly credited as the founder of the pharmaceutical industry, and the reason that medical error is currently the third leading cause of death in America. This is not an indictment against doctors. More than anyone, they are under the stranglehold of the single largest lobbying power in Washington. Every year, the pharmaceutical industry spends at least twice the amount as big oil to influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
Once you start waking up from the hypnotic trance of the official lie, the word "they" is often used to lay blame on the perpetrators. This is usually followed by the question, who are they? According to ancient history, religion, mythology, and occult tradition, they are not human, and they have been manipulating humanity from the shadows for millennia. The Gods of Eden by William Bramley does an excellent job of tracing this back through all of recorded history. But let's just start from the late 19th century. Just over a century ago, it was known that giants with red hair and double rows of teeth once inhabited America. These 9-foot-tall giants were written about casually in 1874 by Abraham Lincoln. A few years later, the Smithsonian Institute began confiscating giant mummies and skeletons by the thousands. In 1886, the exclusive Jekyll Island Club was founded and built upon an ancient burial site of the
I didn't even realize it, but we made it to the second part already. This is the end of the first part, guys. Are you guys enjoying this? Is this piquing your interest? Glad you guys stuck around for the whole thing. Please leave your comments on thoughts, anything like that. I'm getting ready to head to bed myself, y'all. Okie dokie, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. I'll see you all tomorrow.